Israeli authorities say a number of people have been arrested after protesters in the occupied West Bank blocked an aid convoy bound for Gaza. The protesters were seen throwing food packages onto the road and destroying some of it. The trucks came from Jordan and were waiting to cross the Tarqumiya checkpoint west of Hebron. A far-right Israeli group says they were demonstrating against the continued detention of Israeli hostages in Gaza. Now, the United Nations has warned that Palestinians in northern Gaza are experiencing a full-blown famine. This as the Israeli army returned there to fight resurgent Hamas forces.
Smoke rises over Jabalia in northern Gaza. Hamas operatives have returned to the area as Israeli forces push to retake parts of Gaza they had previously cleared. Civilians are caught in the crossfire.
There are wounded and dead that we cannot reach because of the consistent bombing of our crews and ambulances by Israeli forces. Ambulances are being directly targeted and the artillery continues to launch rockets into the center of the Jabalia camp.
According to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, over 35,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war. While the United States, Israel's strongest ally, says it does not believe a genocide is happening in Gaza, the White House has uttered some of its strongest criticism of Israel's war effort to date.
Military operation has to be connected to a political plan for the day after, so that there is a clear alternative and there's governance and there's security and all of the steps you need to take to finally and fully defeat a hardened, entrenched terrorist foe. And yes, one of the risks of engaging in any kind of counterinsurgency campaign is the ability of the terrorist group to attract more recruits and more followers as time goes on. This is something we have talked to the Israelis about.
Meanwhile, in Rafah, in the south of Gaza, Israeli forces are carrying out what they call a limited military operation to root out one of the last Hamas strongholds. The army says it's taken out dozens of terrorists and found tunnels and weapons depots. But the latest operation has also forced hundreds of thousands of civilians to again flee, this time northwards.
Let's bring in Noga Tarnopolsky, a freelance journalist in Jerusalem who has covered Israel and the Palestinian territories for decades. Welcome. In addition to Rafah, Israel's forces now also going back into the north of Gaza, pounding areas that they said they'd cleared months ago, but now seeing Hamas regrouping there. How much of a setback is this for Israel, and what does it tell us about Israel's war strategy?
Well, what it tells us is that Gaza is on its way to becoming an Israeli quagmire. It's not so much a setback as simply a logical next path for a major military operation that has no political, diplomatic, strategic endpoint in sight, as the U.S. State Department, as the White House, said so clearly. I have to say that Israeli military top brass have been warning of this situation for at least several months now. And the government appears to be paralyzed when asked to determine what its endpoint for this fighting is.
Tell us more about this paralysis. As you say, we heard Jake Sullivan there urging a plan for the day after. Also, we heard on Monday a senior U.S. State Department official saying that Washington does not think that Israel's goal of victory over Hamas in Gaza is likely or even possible. What is the Israeli government doing with that assessment?
Well, as strange as it is to say this, the Israeli government has not responded to those assessments, has not said a word, and has used the cover of two major national holidays here, Memorial Day followed by Independence Day today, and really the shattered feeling of most Israeli citizens. It has used this as a cover not to have to respond. The other thing that's important to say is that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not made himself available either to the press or to the public. So there has been no opportunity, given the government's lack of response, to ask directly. And I think it's also important to say that Netanyahu himself, who has been repeating now for several months this motto, total victory, it's become really a daily slogan, has never defined it, either in Israel or abroad, not to the media and not to anyone else. You could see part of this frustration, and I think it's also important to say part of the real heartbreak of Israeli citizens yesterday in Memorial Day event, in the only event in which Netanyahu was even nearby to any members of the public. He was present at the National Memorial event for fallen soldiers, and a parent of a soldier who fell in this war yelled out at him, heckled him, which is very unusual at that kind of a formal ceremony. I would say it's even unheard of. So the situation is one in which it appears the Israeli government just does not want to respond to the reality that you're describing.
Do you see a way that Netanyahu's government could redefine this goal? Is there an off-ramp for him if Israel is not successful in ousting Hamas from Gaza?
Yeah, although first I have to say it's unclear what is meant by ousting Hamas from Gaza, because the Israeli government has been given a very clear opportunity by very important partners, the United States and Egypt in this case. Egypt borders on the other side of Gaza, to install Palestinian officials with wider Arab military backing to take over power from Hamas in the Gaza Strip. One of the reasons that Israel has not been able to uproot Hamas power points within Gaza is that it is refusing to determine who will take power. If a different governing body were brought into Gaza with military backing, that would make Israel's task a lot easier. But the Israeli government refuses to do that. The reason is political. Netanyahu fears losing some of his more hardline ministers if he agrees to allow the Palestinian Authority in, but he will absolutely break international support for Israel if he publicly says that Israel is simply going to remain there as an occupying power. And stuck between these two pressures, he has simply chosen indecision. That's where Israel is for now.
Thank you so much for joining us with those insights today. That is journalist Noga Tarnopolsky.